few times we've heard about partners. And having had partners and having not had partners, I want to just riff on that for a couple minutes. There are lots of people you can go out for drinks with. There are lots of people you can go bowling with. That doesn't mean you have to get married to those people. And partnership is the same thing. I did a riff in the Bootstrapper's Bible called Ringo Was the Luckiest Beatle. Because there's this sense that if there are 4 Beatles, everyone ought to own 25% because there's 4 of them. There's a sense that if you meet somebody in the bar and the two of you are sketching out the business well, you shake hands and you each own half. Fair is fair. And that's never a good idea. That a partner is a very special person. I had one astounding partner in my career, the very first project I ever really did, and Steve and I complemented each other. We didn't reinforce each other, we complemented each other, and we trusted each other, and we were both in at the same level of commitment. And for the 2 years that we worked together, we really made a ruckus. And it was ideal because he was the guy who was going to go to Harvard Business School and did spreadsheets and went to difficult meetings, and I was the guy who was going to go to Stanford Business School, and I invented businesses and made flashy stuff happen. And I wasn't jealous of him, and he wasn't jealous of me, and it worked. But that is rare. And what is far more likely is someone's perception of what needs to be done isn't the same as yours. And someone's understanding of cash isn't the same as yours. And if you have a 50-50 partnership, it's only going to take weeks or months before somebody is annoyed at the other person and before decisions don't go the way they need to. So there are 2 problems that need to be solved here. Problem number 1 is you need access to technical expertise. You need access to somebody who can program when you need programming, design when you need design, explain the legalities of 529s when you need them explained, for sure. And the other thing you need is you need someone to have your back, which is a totally different thing. And so you need to think hard when you get started, when the equity seems cheap but in the long run is extremely valuable, what you're going to do before you take half of it and move it over here, or 25% of it and move it over there. And so the suggestions I have are as follows. 1, everyone, including you, earns the equity over time. So you say to somebody, great, I'm starting this business, I need you to work with me as my head of sales. The first 50 sales we make are the most important. I'm going to give you 0.1% of the company for every one of those 50 sales that gets made. So if you lose interest after 5 people, we learned something, and you end up with a tiny sliver of the company. But if you can really bring me all these sales you say you can bring me, and 50 sales later this company is really valuable, well, you've earned it, because over time you were earning your way in. Number 2 is figuring out who has your back. And there's a difference between someone who has your back once a week on the phone and someone who has your back in the office every day, all day long. And it's a very tricky, psychodynamic, political problem that's not easy to solve. So for James Bond, it was Moneypenny. And Moneypenny was on a government salary of $19,000 a year. She wasn't a partner in the Secret Service, but James knew that Moneypenny was never going to let him down. You can have an office admin who's this person, right? That's fine. I mean, there were people I worked with at Yoyodyne who were very junior, but who I had history with, and I could just sit down with them and tell them what I was afraid of and tell them what wasn't working, and I knew it wasn't going to leave the room. And it was better that I could do it with that person, with the tightrope I was on, rather than someone who was my partner, because I wouldn't have felt comfortable necessarily sharing just how out on a limb I was. Right? So what I'm imagining here is that you're dividing these tasks up. You're saying, I really need a brilliant graphic designer. But guess what? That graphic designer probably doesn't want to own half your company. If she did, she'd already would have owned or co-founded something. Maybe what she needs is plenty of positive feedback, plenty of credit, and a regular paycheck. Because those are 3 things graphic designers rarely get. And so you don't necessarily give that person equity. You give the equity to someone who has cash and understands what equity is worth, and then give the cash to the graphic designer who values the cash more than they value the equity. Okay? So you just have to be very deliberate about this because I know what it's like to be out in the wilderness when no one believes in you and finally someone shows up and believes in you and you're so grateful, you just give them part of your company. And then you regret it because it's going to take your company 7 years. That's how long it's going to take before you say, phew. That's how long it took Andrew Harper, 7 years. And the question is, 7 years from now, is that person you gave 25% of the company going to be standing next to you helping you as much as they helped you then? Because that's what they're getting rewarded for, what's going to happen in 7 years. If you take a look at the cap table, does everyone know what a cap table is? Is it worth me taking 2 minutes to explain? Okay, so here's the way it works. Every company has 100% to be owned. So my company, I own 100% of it. When I owned Yoyodyne, the first day, I owned 100% of it because it was the first day. Then someone comes in and says, I'll give you $5 million for 20% of the company. What that means is they have valued the company at how much? $25 million, right? Because they get a fifth of it for $5 million. You multiply by 5, $25 million gets you 20%. So now the cap table is 20% to the guy who put in $5 million, 80% to Seth. So I now own 80% of a company worth $25 million, which is pretty cool. As the cash gets spent, the company might be worth more because you've spent the cash to increase value. Or it might be worth less, right? Because you're squandering the cash. Along the way, you start hiring employees. Those employees might want equity. You might give them stock up front, or they might get stock options, which they grow over time. Well, in order to get equity, there needs to be more than 100% because I own 80 and the investor owns 20. So what do? We print more shares on a printing press. Now I don't own 80, I own 70. The investor doesn't own 25, they own 22. And those 13% that we were diluted down is now in this new pile that I can hand out to other people. So the cap table is the list of who owns what percentage as time is going on. And it keeps changing over time. Well, when you read about these companies that raise 20, 30, 40, 50 million dollars, how do they keep the cap table working? Well, they go to the founders, they go to the early people, and they give them stock options that they have to earn over the years. So in fact, even though they owned 100% of the company the first day, they're quickly down to like 20%. But they can earn back greater percentage over time by showing up, meeting goals, etc. So that's what I'm talking about. That if you're playing at a higher stakes than just, I have this little business and I'm going to cut in my landlord for part, what you'll find is you'll give yourself options so that as the employees and other people are gaining shares, you're also gaining shares so that you're not completely diluting yourself as you go through that.